good. I mean, I think, for where I live in the United States, it's very cold and I live in Illinois, so the
Oh,
snow is going to start flying, and right now all the trees are turning all the different colors, and so for me, it's just getting ready. Winter's coming if we're going to keep on the Game of Thrones analogies.
yeah, no, definitely, definitely. But thank you for coming back on the podcast, Sherrie. Like, I appreciate it because, like I said, I was just a bit annoyed that that didn't record. What was even on, I couldn't even pinpoint the reason why because I had like I just don't understand what happened. I thought maybe it was my Zoom, but we're not gonna have that problem today.
Well, I'm on strong internet, so just in case I had something to do with it, because I was
No,
remote,
no,
I was at a hotel, so I don't know, but we're good.
no, nothing you're on. We're good, we're good. And like, just as we spoke about before, I wanted to just kind of delve into like, before we talk about Hope Spell and all the positive reviews, or just from starting it to releasing it, I want to just kind of go back a bit into your grief journey and essentially what sparked you to write, basically.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, like we talked about, I think it is about the difficult, really just avoiding those difficult conversations. And so is Ben joining us or no?
Oh, so I'm still waiting for him, but I think we'll just, yeah, I'm sure if he does jump, I'll just time into the convo, so it's fine.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. With your magic. Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
No,
So,
no, you're good.
so the question is just why did I write it? Or
Yeah, so I guess it's more so I wanted to delve into more into your story with grief. So, the loss that you experienced that sort of led you to, write more and also in turn help others.
great. So it really was COVID. I think we all have personal journeys, but I think what made me decide to write and have the courage to write was the pandemic. And I was so upset because so many people were not able to be with their loved ones. So the closure, and then they weren't able to go to church, and they weren't even able to go over to homes and give hugs and provide any kind of comfort. And when I was young, I always had this story about heaven's bell, and that bells were hung in heaven when somebody died. And so I had told the story a couple times to young people and my niece, and to one of my friends who had grandchildren. And I was encouraged to write down the story, but I didn't identify as an author. I didn't identify as somebody that, maybe even did well with death and dying. I don't like death and dying. I don't think anybody does. But I wanted to help people. And I think it's a difficult conversation. It's awkward. Where do you start? How do you show your support? I mean, it's just icky all the way around. But I believe that this story could be a place where people could create some safe space and show up for people that they love that are grieving. And it might be a way to be able to talk about their loved one and keep the memory of their loved one alive through the awkwardness of the fact that death is sad. And we really, I think as humans, want to avoid sad things, right? We view that as conflict. So I don't want to say anything. I'll just flip a card out the car window. So really the impetus was the pandemic.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think I really resonate with what you said there because we don't like to have the uncomfortable conversations, especially around death. And I'm not sure how you feel about this, but I feel like the pandemic was not like it was like a reset, but more importantly, it was a way to introduce, I would say, change to people, and not only that, change that might result in loss. And again, a lot of the time we're not faced with such like I would say a large majority of loss where it's affecting everyone. People are dying. Usually, grief can be in isolation to someone, but not something that's affecting the entire world. So I think from that perspective, it's not nice that it's happened, but it also the harsh reality of it is that it's exposed people to loss, and how they really feel about someone, because how they feel about someone will determine the relationship they had with that person. So I feel like it's sad. I wish it didn't happen. I wish people didn't have to lose people in such a way that in a way that can cause a lot of, I would say, upheaval, because there's projects behind it regarding hospital treatment and things like that. So it's a whole different thing. So I can't imagine having that sort of carrying that emotion on your head. Yeah, it must be difficult. So I think writing is like any other avenue to help people with grief. So I think at some point it's only expected that people are going to resonate with things that they look going through, basically.
And I think there's a commonality there that because it was happening at such a global rate and such a massive experience with death, even if a family wasn't experiencing a personal COVID situation or death or illness, you still, as a family unit, were seeing it covered on television. So, my children were concerned. What does this mean? You're experiencing all the reports of the death and the death tolls and the dying. There was fear. There was grieving for people that we really didn't know intimately, but still felt sad about it. Varying different religions, varying different perspectives on death and what does that look like. So it was unavoidable regardless of what you were experiencing, because at some point, in some way, we were all experiencing loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think, like I said, it's the first time people are getting to really I don't want the right word to use instead of exposed, but I don't know, I feel that's the only word I can describe how I want to describe it. And when I say exposed, I don't mean in a negative way. I just mean more so on this idea that people are now learning what grief is. People, whether it's affecting you directly, or you've seen someone who's lost, someone due to COVID and things like that. So it's definitely a time that did bring about change, but also that just in terms of your emotions and also just your physical well-being, because people lost jobs as
Yes.
well. That's another thing. So that brings about a whole heap of other issues to worry about, as well
And
as
grieving.
so it's a lot. And just going back to uh the pandemic and writing for you. So like, at what point did was there something just aside from just the pandemic that made you feel like this, I need to write a book about this and it needs to happen fast?
Yeah, I think my superpower, everybody has a superpower. I do feel like my superpower is storytelling, more verbally than written. But I knew that if I could write it down, which I had been asked to do by others that heard the story, um, it felt like it might be a useful tool to be able to bring people together and share the opportunity to hear the story, read the story. And then what was happening is once people read the story, they weren't talking about the story, they were talking about their loved one. So immediately when I told the story, the next thing out of the person's mouth was a memory about their loved one. So I thought, if I could write it down and it could go worldwide, and there's an Audible as well, that it could help people have the courage to open up. And we needed it quickly because it was happening, the pandemic was happening so fast and we were losing so many people. And we needed people to have the courage to be able to say, it's okay to be proactive, reach out and want to talk about people's loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I had feedback from someone who said, I would have normally not gone to their home. I would have normally, it's almost like the pandemic helped them hide because they didn't have to show up. And what the story did is give them an opportunity to show up. They could send the book, they could stop by with the book, they could talk about the story. And that created such a rich conversation that didn't feel conflictual.
Mhm.
it gave both parties a safe place to be able to talk about something other than the sadness. Even though that's there, it's about celebrating the memories. So it was a catalyst, but I knew I couldn't help myself. Like, it was something that I knew deep down. I just had to do. I've never really had an experience like that before, but I just knew, like, it was time. And I had that story for probably 10 years.
They say always trust the gut.
Yes,
Always,
yes.
you
And
know.
it has been an amazing journey to see the reviews on Amazon. I think there's probably 70 or 80 5-star reviews across Goodreads and Amazon. But again, if you read the reviews, people are talking about their loved ones. People are talking about what the story did, not the story,
Right.
which is a beautiful thing for my personality. I love it. It's helping people talk.
I feel like that's, again, as a writer, I feel like, in my opinion, that is what will literally not give you an ego boost, but make you feel
Yes.
like what I'm doing is special, because not only it's not the story, but people are speaking about how it's making them feel or making them remember their loved ones. Or like, I feel like that's the best thing. Like, so when writing, was that the initial impact you wanted, or was it like, yeah, was that the initial impact you wanted?
Yes. I just didn't realize, I wasn't sure it was going to work. It was the scariest thing I had ever done. I had hired people to help me. So I had a book coach, and it was all female team. I had a book coach and an editor and a first-time illustrator, a marketeer, if you will. But that's what I had hoped, because that's what I had experienced verbally when I had told it.
Yeah.
But it's beyond my wildest dreams that it's continuing to make a difference.
Yeah, that's special. And so, like with anything we all do, there's always going to be an element of doubts, and at times it might, uh, doubt might encroach on the hope. Like, how did you prevent that from happening? How did you prevent the doubts you were having from literally killing the actual dream, or
Well,
stop from killing the dream?
well, first of all, I mean, I let all of those doubts be a barrier for a decade. But I think my wanting to help people outweighed my insecurities.
Okay.
I really felt like I am coming from a place of authenticity and wanting to help. And if I can put that out into the world right now with the experience, with the loss that we're experiencing, it can't hurt. So it was just this absolutely, if not now, when we need this. And if I think about the school shootings, and if I think about all of the the media coverage with some of the losses that we're experiencing in mass, I truly believe this is another tool to add to helping one another. I also feel like it's a book that's geared to that 8 to 12-year-old audience, even though people will argue with me and say it's not a children's book. But I do feel like sometimes in some of the stories that I've received, sometimes we experience our first loss in that age range. And that's kind of the age range that I had told the story before I wrote the book. Because I think sometimes there's the young, Bernstein Bears loses grandpa. And then there's kind of the really heavy resources for counselors or adults, with the stages. And this is just kind of a tween fable story to get a conversation started. It's I've heard people say it's sad, right? It's a book about a friendship to 11, 12-year-olds, and one of them dies early on in the book. But I think it's geared toward an audience, but it's also a different type of tool that starts a conversation and that could go into that therapy realm very easily.
Yeah, exactly. And that's essentially what's important, having started that conversation, because talking about it can be extremely difficult. And I was going to say something earlier, something that I feel like in terms of the pandemic and grief, I feel like it didn't allow people to grieve, because although like you were experiencing loss on such a rapid rate and on a mass scale, like people don't, because not only people are still have, you still have to quarantine, you still have to follow social distancing, so you're not burying someone as you would normally with, you know, pre-pandemic. And I can't imagine what that must feel like, and having to experience what that does to you mentally, because you're almost having to rush to say goodbye, and it shouldn't be something we need to rush, you know. Of course, I know it's hard, and some might find it easier just to get over and done with, but there's some who want to say a proper goodbye, want to really take it all in, like do the final steps, or have the, you know, the funeral they feel like that the person deserves. But you know, you couldn't do that with a pandemic, and
Yes.
you
And
know,
it's, yeah, and there are other things, right? So, you know, I had somebody who talked about losing a loved one in a car accident. You don't have the opportunity to say goodbye. Suicide. Um, so in the book, there's kind of an awkward goodbye, but she wasn't at, you know, Ashley wasn't at Cody's bedside. So I don't know, you know, we kind of have this ideal, you know, when somebody dies, this is what it's going to be like. I'm going to be there holding their hand. I'm going to be able to say I love them. And that isn't always the case, pandemic or not, you know. And so how do we create that closure, and how do we help one another grieve through what we have no control over? As much as we think we do, we don't.
exactly, and it's true. And I think, would you say the book helps to like give you a overview of, not overview, but give you like an idea of what grief is like, but not in a way that sugarcoats it, basically, you know, like you said, there's not always going to be, you know, the ideal goodbye. Sometimes going to be awkward, you know. And not only just that, is sometimes it's going to be difficult to have that closure. It's not always a thing that is a given, you know. And yeah, so I feel like, you know, do you feel like that the book does a good job in like giving that uh you know, representation of grief, like a authentic representation of grief?
I think it's a representation of a story that we can all relate to about grief. So, you know, there's an awkward goodbye. Ashley's angry and grumpy, and you know, kind of, you know, turns inward, um, is upset, is looking for signs from her friend Cody. So there's just a lot of pieces and elements to the story that, depending on your own experience, I think you'll be able to find places that might bring an opportunity to think through some of your grief, and maybe share some conversations around it. I think with children, and I talk about this in a letter to the parents in the beginning of the book, and some thoughts around how children grieve depending on how old they are. But, you know, sometimes if their face is in their phone, that doesn't mean that they're not listening or they're not connected. It just might be a safe way for them to think.
Hmm.
Or sometimes I'm as a 13-year-old, I might be very sensitive that I don't want to bring up that I'm upset about dad's death, because I don't want to upset my mom. So the mom thinks, okay, well, they're not bringing it up, so I'm not going to bring it up. When really there is this proverbial elephant in the room that we want to be able to create conversations around it. We're all thinking about it. So how do we have the courage to talk about it? So there's different elements in the story that you could use as commonalities to talk about that, right? Just like a book club, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think that's essentially the hard part. And what you said there about children, or, on the one hand, the parent might think, oh, they're just, always playing their video games on their phones. That means they don't really care what's happening, or they've shut out. But actually, that might be a coping mechanism. They might
Correct.
care, but they don't, like you said, they don't want to upset anyone else or have anyone else feel like they can't, because sometimes it's like emotional intelligence, because they might see like, okay, one parent's already, doing their best for us, so I don't want to add to that. And even though that is noble of them, but at the same time, they need to talk about it, because if there's clarity amongst how everyone's feeling, then you can kind of sort of know how to navigate amongst each other and be there for each other and support each other in terms of what it is the other needs. So I feel like if your book is like a vessel for that, for people, to open conversation in their homes,
Yes,
and and I think that's great.
I like that. That's a great way to describe it. And you can make it your own. You can put in it what you want with your own memories and your shared memories. And even in the younger, when I told the story originally to a 6-year-old, she was having nightmares. Her dad had died, and she was having nightmares and not able to sleep in her room alone. And so I just made her a bell. And I told the story about, hang this bell on your bed, and let's talk about when you think of your dad, his bell in heaven rings. So it's just and I think because it was tangible, it was something real that she could hold and think about her dad. She was able to sleep in her room, and it kind of gave her a pathway to process at a very, very young age. Again, this isn't a replacement for therapy or counseling or religion. That's not it. But it is, I think, an additional, either a gift that you could give a grieving family, or a tool as a parent or an aunt or an uncle that just might create some space.
Yeah. Yeah. But so, when you said earlier that, of course, like, as much as it appears to be a lot of positive review about the book and people are really supportive of it, and you mentioned that, this isn't a substitute for like therapy, and are those things you just sort of say when like someone else has sort of prompted you on that, or is it something that you've like maybe put as a clear disclaimer in the book, or just something that you kind of tell people off the back of them leaving a review, and stuff like that?
No, I mean, again, it's a fable, it's a story. So I don't think it comes even close to the realm of, giving any advice or any kind of, social work kind of expertise. I have had hospice executives and social workers say that they are using the story as a way to get conversations started, and having students read the story, because it takes it out of a direct conversation. I have degrees, my bachelor's degree is in communication, my master's degree is in communication, and a lot of my thesis was about communication competence and the propensity to take conflict personally. I know that sounds really boring, but when you think about death, right, it is conflict,
Mm-hmm.
and people avoid conflict. And then I did add a journal this last year. I lost my dad in February. He died. And I had already started thinking about questions and thoughts around the feedback that I was getting from the book. And so I put together a journal called Ring to Remember. And between the book and the journal, now I have counselors and social workers using that set more.
Oh,
But
nice.
again, the questions aren't anything that, again, that I'm trained on. They're just kind of Sherrie questions. Like, what's the first question you think your loved one is going to ask you when you see them in heaven?
Mm.
Or is there a holiday tradition that is hard now that your loved one is gone that you can recreate? So it's just very basic questions, but I think large questions to be able to allow for that conversation. But I
Yeah.
don't claim to be trained. I'm just a storyteller.
No, that's good. And yeah, the reason why I mentioned, because sometimes people might, have get that, and it's always good to sort of like always convey what it is, that you stand for, the book stands for. But either way, like I feel like, personally speaking, if you're writing about grief and from the heart as well, being genuine, there's no such. It's always going to be met with positivity. I don't see why anyone would have anything negative to say about that, especially when you're doing it sincerely and there's no agenda behind it. It's just, I want to help people,
Yes.
and I don't think you can go wrong with that, to be honest with you.
Yes. Thank you.
And even speaking of that, like, so, and I'm sure you might have had the same idea where you felt like, I'm writing sincerely, this is from the heart. Was that enough to stop any sort of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, or any like fear that was literally holding you back from really pushing this off the ground?
I think that's the key. It outweighed my fear.
Mhm.
My need to help outweighed it. And I think that's important. I stopped my self-talk that, I'm not an author, and what if people don't like this? And, maybe people are going to view this as, I don't know, not sufficient. And it just, you have to push through that and just say, you know what, I'm just trying to share my gifts. If you don't like it, great. But if you do, let me know. And it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah, that's the thing. And literally, when you have that, because I feel like writing a book, putting it out there, it's definitely something to be proud of. And and at the same time, look, I get it. We all want our work to be acknowledged, but I think there's a fine line between over wanting it and realizing, look, as long as I know that I'm putting my messages out there for whoever to consume it can consume it, have that in mind. Don't worry about anything else. But it's still hard, isn't it? It's still, because you're still gonna have, like, maybe I can only talk for myself here, because I can get very, start overthinking, and then before I know it, I haven't done anything. I'm like, I've said to myself, oh, in 2 years I'm going to do this, and then 2 years has gone by, I still haven't done what I said to do. So it's like, I want to stop myself from that, and just be like, you know what, you've got nothing to lose. Like,
Yes,
it's easier said than done most of the time.
right. And part of I know my strength was realizing where I needed help, and then hiring for it. Like, I never thought in a million years I would draw the picture for the cover and the chapters. So, if I needed help with an editor, or if I needed help with a book coach, then hire it,
Yeah.
or ask friends to look at it. But remove the barriers as you start to move forward with whatever project that is. And I think part of it, when we think about grieving families, right, or having those difficult conversations, whatever they are, as leaders or as colleagues, sometimes, you have to have those courageous conversations. I just go for it, because anybody that's experiencing loss is going to appreciate your attempt, however awkward it is.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Like, so how do you feel the book influenced your family life, and just people around you?
Well, when my father died in February, it was really vulnerable for me, because the book had been published. A lot of people had read it. So now everybody's up in my brain, right? Everybody's up in my own coping mechanism of how I approach death. I believe that our loved ones are right here with us, that they are in heaven. And when we see them again, when I die, they haven't missed a beat, and they're up there just fine, and they're hanging out with their friends and their family members. And So what I got was this community of commonality in this story where they were saying Ray's bell is ringing and he's up there right now with your father-in-law and what he thinks going on. And so it was just even in his obituary, you know, his kids and stuff talked about the bell and heaven's bell. So it was vulnerable, but it was also really supportive. But that's changed, I think, how our family looks at death. I mean,
Really?
the story's out there, so we talk about it a lot.
Right. So was it like in the way you looked at it? So what was the way you looked at it then, and how do you, and how has the book influenced how you look at it now, whether that's you personally or as a family?
It's less lonely. I mean, it was a story that I had that I kept to myself, right? So it was just my way of finding joy in my grief journey, that they're okay. I miss them, but they're okay. And you know, I would ring their bell whenever I thought of them, whether it's at, you know, every single day for my father Ray, but even looking at holidays and things. So it's less lonely because now everybody's showing up and talking about the story and knowing that it's safe to talk about our loved ones who have died.
Yeah.
That so I'm offering to them that you're not going to make me sad. It's we can talk about our loved ones who are no longer with us here on earth, but that we can continue to celebrate who they are and talk about their wonderfulness here and the traditions. It's okay. So in a way, it's less lonely.
Yeah. It's true. I feel like I'm someone who, you know, I had different consume different things like podcasts on grief, you know, books as well. And I don't know, I think when, you know, I do agree with it can, I know you said it's less lonely, but in the beginning for me, grief, I just felt so alone. I've never been so vulnerable. Like, I just felt like it just feels different. Like, I feel I'm the only one going through this. And although I wasn't, but it felt like that, especially
Yeah.
because, you know, like my age at the time was in my mid-20s. So I was like, okay, this is not supposed to happen now. You know, so I just felt like I'm not experiencing this. No one else knows what this is like. And I don't wish on anyone, but it's just that sense of loneliness because you have to deal with this alone. If there was someone there who had gone through it already, at least maybe I can go to them. How do you deal with it? But I'm doing everything from yeah, with no guidance. And again, I know I'm not the first person, but it felt very difficult. Like, how am I gonna get out of this dark cloud?
Yes, I'm sorry. And it's such a personal journey, and no one's going to do it for you. They might be able to do it with you, but you should be able to do it the way you're wired to have that grief journey. But it is important, I think, to make sure that you're present for people that are grieving. And we are not good at that as a society. We are not good at it. We think we need to have the answers. So we're going to come in and say, hey, you know, it's been a year, or hey, you know what, at least your mom's still alive, or hey, at least you have brothers and sisters to lean in. I mean, like, why do we feel the need? Why do we feel the need to have answers versus just ask questions?
Yeah,
You know, how's today? How are you doing today? I'd like to take you to dinner. I'd like to drop off something for you. Or, I mean, just ask what makes you the most sad, or what memory can you share with me? Or like I said, the journal will give you tons of prompts, 100 pages of prompts if you don't want to come up with an answer or a question on your own. But so many people kind of put that burden of, I got to lift their chin up, I've got to tell them what to do, and that's not what we need when we're grieving.
yeah. But
We
sometimes it's, oh, sorry.
No, I just think we need to be loved, right? We just need We just
Yeah,
need to know people are there that love us.
100%. But something I do feel like, like the need to always have answers is because we don't want to, in my opinion anyway, we don't want to seem like we don't care because, if someone who's, you're trying to support someone who's lost someone in their, especially in their lives, what do you say? Like, it's like, I don't know, if I feel like in my experience, when I've gone to, like support those who've gone through grief, I've almost felt a bit nervous because like, I don't know what to say right now. I don't want to pretend that I want to acknowledge that I know that you're hurt and you're going through this, but also I don't want it to seem like I don't care. So it's like trying to find the balance. Like, okay, well, if I tell them, oh, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay. Like, is that reassurance is like your way of saying that you care, but sometimes it's the opposite. You maybe just sit with them or ask them, questions like, but in a gentle way, what you need, like how you feeling, just simple things, or, but it's not easy. Like I said, I've experienced it personally, but I've also like experienced trying to support people. And it's hard and it can be nerve-wracking when you feel like you don't want to trigger someone because the grief is still fresh.
Yes, yes. Or even just to, I call it the color analysis, right? Just to say, I feel really sad too. Or um, I try to lead with curiosity. It just explore or just sit, right? Make some tea and sit. Sometimes it's just time. It's okay not to have all the answers. I think what's most important, even if it feels awkward or you even say something that you think is awkward, like, what do you say? I'm sorry. What do you say after that? Just be there with them.
Yeah, and it's also the need of sometimes we have to acknowledge that we can be wrong sometimes, but just say, I apologize. It doesn't, and I get it because you don't want to say the wrong thing, but sometimes that's how you learn, so by learning to know what to say or what not to say, but so long as, if you are someone who is trying to support someone grieving, so long as you're sincerely respectful, like you're genuinely respectful, you're trying to be there for them. It doesn't matter. You don't have to necessarily say anything if you don't know what to say. Just ask them what you need. Anything I can do. It doesn't matter. However, like even if, yeah, it doesn't matter. I know they sound like very simple questions, but sometimes you need to just leave it as that. You don't need to always feel the need to have the right answers because we don't. Even those of us who are experiencing it, we don't have the right answers. We're only telling you based off of experience in the hope that it will help you too. So, because it's you just what works for me might not work for someone else or work for you.
Right. It's just give yourself a break. You don't have to have all the right things to say. No one's expecting that. Just show up. Just show up. And I think we've learned a lot of lessons through the pandemic. We understand how isolating the world can be, let alone in a time of conflict. And if you can lead with curiosity, have the courage to ask questions or just be present, be quiet and be present. I think that is a long way to helping people know that they're supported and loved.
Yeah, 100%. And and as we go, but just circling back on the pandemic, and as I said before, it's sad that's happened. It's sad, but also there's this other kind of side of looking at the pandemic where people have actually it was like a reset, but also a way for people to really like go after the things they've been holding back because there is nothing else to kind of distract you now, whether before that might have been work, kids, or wherever it may be. But as that pandemic literally said to look, you need to just slow down and really focus on what are you suppressing? What is it that you've that's been on the back burner that you really are scared to let fly off the shelves. You know what I mean? So that would you say that was your experience as well with writing the book?
Yes. And I think the pandemic, while it's air quotes over, there are so many families that are devastated by the loss of one parent or both parents or grandparents. So the familiar structure of how we are talking about death or coping with this new family unit, it's millions, it's tens of millions worldwide. So yeah, it's the pandemic is not killing people as many people as it was at one time, but the aftermath, the after effects of our grief and our inability to talk about it, I think hopefully we can do better. And I think as leaders of our families, I think as adults, opening up and being able to be present is going to be so important, because there's a lot that we're dealing with.
Yeah, it's like it takes a long time to be unpack things, and I think that's one thing I've struggled with. Like I'm very good at just concealing things, and which is good up until a certain degree. But I feel like, being vulnerable can be scary at times. But there's a sense of calmness when you've actually allowed yourself to be vulnerable and let things out. Like, I get it. It can be scary because we don't have like that sort of safe haven, whether that's a mental thing or whether that's physically, we don't have a safe haven. Like, it can be hard to really have uh, that vulnerability and be stable in a sense where like you can share things, you can talk to your parents freely or whoever your guardians are. Like, but I just feel like, like with grief, especially if you already have that sort of setup, it's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot to really express what you're feeling. And like, I feel like the book is doing that, like for some people, like in my opinion, of course, like, I can't predict what people are feeling, but I get that sense from how you've spoken about the process to the people it's kind of been have been receptive towards it. So I have that feeling that it is doing that, and you are spark conversation in different households to the point where people can feel more free with their grief.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's really what storytelling is all about, right? It's making it less scary,
Mm.
but providing maybe a different door to walk through and a different approach to a difficult conversation. And I think there's a lot of work to be done on this topic. I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of wonderful organizations out there. We have a lot of information at our fingertips that maybe we didn't have decades ago,
Yeah.
that are, you know, my my guardians, didn't have access to. So if we all need to do our part to be able to try to help people communicate, and this is just one tool, but there are many others. Were you able to find a support group or find support in a way that helped you grieve, or did it take a while?
I feel like I almost feel like I wasn't intent really searching to begin with, but I feel like through starting the podcast, that sort of allowed me to like inadvertently have a support group because I met other people who were also doing grief podcasts or doing some sort of sharing resources on grief. I also felt like, okay, I felt like this is people who've gone through it as well. Some had lost, both parents as well. Some had lost a parent or a sibling or, just had experienced loss. So I felt a bit more um wholesome in a sense where I had people that can. So it's almost like I'm creating this platform on grief as a way
Mm.
just to channel my grief, but I'm back to it, but not in a bad sense, but in a sense where off the back of it, I've now met people who have gone through the same thing. So I feel like a sense of community, which feels good. And it's not to say that I don't want people to be in this community because it's not what we're going through. Again, you wouldn't wish it on your friend or anyone else, So that's why I said that, but not in a rude way, but but unfortunately here we are, and it's just about taking the bitter with the sweet, and we have each other in a sense. So
Sure.
yeah, so I feel like for me, like my podcast helped me to, yeah, like deal with it, but in a good way.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And we would probably be hard pressed to find someone over the age of a certain age, right, that hasn't experienced death in some way.
Yeah,
So it's just interesting that it's just a difficult topic. It's a difficult conversation, as it should be, but how do we get better at it?
yeah. But what do you feel like? I know, like I would say the onus is on us who are trying to spark those conversations about grief. The onus is on us to get better. But how do you feel like, say, the world can get better, society can get better with grief? Like, what's one thing you would propose if you could sort of change things in terms of how society sees grief, and that can be good or bad,
Mhm.
in your opinion.
I think for what I get confused about is that there's society is creating this unspoken, grief is something that we have to be afraid of and something that we view as conflict, and there's rituals around it and there's etiquette around it, and we put all this pressure on what to say, what not to say. I think it starts at the individual level. If you think about any societal change that's ever happened, it's usually starting with the people, right? The individuals. And so I think it's cutting ourselves some slack and and having confidence, right? Not those barriers, not unlike writing the book. It's okay to share how you're feeling, whether I'm the individual grieving, whether I'm the individual trying to help someone that's grieving. I think where we can change is person by person showing up or saying, I'm having a really hard day versus I'm fine. Thanks for asking. It's authenticity. I have been there for friends and saying, I have no idea what to say right now, except that I'm sorry and I'm sad and I can cry right along with you. Okay, let's start somewhere. Just start somewhere.
Yeah, like I said, it's always difficult, but I feel like in the way that I see grief now, there's just so many resources out there, not just in terms of books, YouTube, there's podcasts, there's so many, and of course you can't resonate with every single resource out there, but there'll be something that you can, the right resource for you, you would find that, wherever that may be. And that's a great thing, because there's some people who really, like, they can delve into a book. They can read a book. They can imagine what's being written. They can see it. So like if you have that sort of point mindset with books, then of course they're gonna find your book to be amazing and everything more to help them with their grief, because again, it's written from a sincere place, and I feel like if you're approaching it in that way, you can't go wrong, you know.
And the book is reading, the journal is writing. The journal also has pages for drawing and memories. So, if there's events that you've been to or programs or tickets or what have you, but it's a place that I think everybody grieves differently,
Yeah,
and so it's just to capture those feelings. And it could change 6 months from now. So what you write or what you draw or the meaningfulness of the story today might be very different 6 months from now. Or vantage points, you might have an answer for a question, and a sibling might have a different answer for the same question
yeah,
about your dad. So it's communication. It's just a tool. So I think it's so individual, but I think as a society, we're a new generation that needs to get better at it. We all need to get better.
yeah. And yeah, it's not easy. But I think it's
No.
just like one step at a time, and just going at your pace. And just on a last comment in regards to the book, You know, like even when last time we spoke, you received a lot of positive reviews and things. Like was there like one review that really stuck with you?
Oh, there were several that took my breath away. One that I liked is that a young mom said she was unable to talk about her mom who died years before, that her two young daughters never met. And she read Heaven's Bell and realized that the story gave her a place to talk about her mother from that wasn't sad, because she didn't want to talk about her mom in front of her children and then cry. She didn't want to associate, oh, mommy's upset every time we talk about her, grandma. And so she said for the first time since her mom died, she was able to tell amazing stories about this wonderful woman and laugh and share memories in a way that was joyful, that now her daughters want to hear more and more about her mom. And it makes her feel like she is keeping her mother's memory alive and able to talk about it. But without that tool, without that story, she said, I don't think I would have been able to get there.
Exactly what I said earlier, sparking conversation. And that's what it is. And that's the starting point. Like again, it'll all be down to people who like reading, but even yeah, but I just feel like it's something that even if you don't like reading and you want to just try something new, like this, like I don't know, I feel like I'm like your PR manager right now, but I'm just saying that.
Good. Good. I need it. No, and that's why I was so interested in coming on your show. I listened to your podcast, yours and Ben's, and you're so real about the conversation. You've experienced such great loss, but you also you're real and you're going in and you're authentic about it. And I just wanted to come on your show. So thank you so much for having me.
No, I appreciate you coming on, and again, there's something that I asked the last time episode we recorded that didn't make the cut. I'm sorry, not the make the cut. That what am I saying? The episode that didn't record properly, basically, because that came out wrong, didn't make the cut. But yeah, the time I remember I asked, and it's like, so if just imagine like there's someone who is in your position where like they want to write about their loss and they want to do that through a book, like what would be like one advice you would give them to not only get over the imposter syndrome but also like really improve their writing skills as they're writing the project?
I would say to ask for help, overcome. So if you have a barrier, or there's something that's stopping you, really think about what that is and what you can do to move through that barrier. And it's one step at a time. Don't go from zero to, I need to sell 1 million copies. That's not what it's about. It's about getting your gifts out there. People are waiting to hear from you. There are people and audiences out there that you are going to connect to. Let that be your driving force and remove the barriers one by one. And before you know it, it will happen.
Yeah, but it's right. So
Go for it.
the thing is, okay, don't worry about numbers.
No.
And but we live in a place where we're so driven, especially on so anything, whether that's anything to do with sales or e-commerce, like literally we're so driven by numbers. So even as a writer, did you ever get any I would not say temptation, but times where you were a bit influenced by numbers? And if you did, how did you come out of that and really have a vision that was less to do with just trying to get a certain amount of numbers or sales? Well, yeah, sales.
No, not at all. I mean, it really came from, if I could help one person. And that's what the barrier was for me, is just, what if this fails? What if this, it's so vulnerable to put it out there. And if it's I called it my ugly baby, right? If it's my ugly baby and everybody sees my ugly baby, then, and I had to get out of my own way. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that have wild success that don't know that they're going to have wild success. but you still have to go for it.
Yeah.
So I dedicated the book to my husband because he finally looked at me and said, would you just get it done? If it helps one person, was it worth it? Would it be worth it if you could help one person? And I said, yes. And then he said, then do it. Do it.
Sometimes tough love.
Yeah.
You know, and that's great. And again, I feel like some things are getting back to me from our last conversation now. I know you mentioned, and I could be wrong. So this is the first of, I'm guessing, the first of many writing projects. You was something else you're working on. I'm not sure how much you can say on that, or if you can't say anything at all.
Yeah, no. So we've got the book and we've got the journal for Heaven's Bell. I think the premise of it, and what I've done for a living, right? My real job is the CEO of 2 recruiting companies and a leadership organization. It's about difficult conversations. So I do have a third book that I actually started writing before Heaven's Bell, but then the pandemic hit and I knew I needed to do Heaven's Bell. And that's more of a business fable that is, again, about difficult conversations, so that when you start your career, it's almost what they didn't teach you in school.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Because I have a lot of executive leaders that I've interviewed throughout my 3 decades of doing what I do. And if you think about career derailment, and if you think about where they have a tendency to maybe not make good decisions, it's usually around having those difficult conversations. Whether it's looking for a promotion or leaving a job out of anger, or not understanding when people are trying to tell them something, but their communication skills aren't strong. So all that is around those difficult conversations, and what if we were able to give somebody just starting their career kind of a cheat sheet, or a way to be able to be better communicators and have those courageous conversations and lead through curiosity. So it's the same premise, it's just with a different topic.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. You have to be updated on that one, because that seems very interesting as well. And
I'll let you know.
so that's not that's still in the works. There's no release date for that yet. But that's in the
Not
works.
not yet, but it's
Okay.
close. It's another ugly baby, but I'm excited to be able to release it and put it into the world.
Yeah, I don't want you to break your your NDA, so I'll stop at that. I'll stop at that. No, but Sherrie, thank you. Like, I appreciate you coming on for the second time. I'm glad that we finally made it happen.
Yes.
As I said in the last convo, like, honestly, like, what you're doing is so inspiring, and I know you said that you like what we're doing, but we're actually, well, speaking on behalf of Ben as well, we're actually very I would say grateful for you to, like, even acknowledge us, and really see us as, the platform you want to share your writing journey and just your experience with grief. Like, that means a lot, for someone of your caliber. And yeah, I'm thankful that you shared with me today, and when this goes out, I'm sure there'll be people there who also would want the book as well, which leads me to my second and last point is, yeah, where can people find the book? So that's if there's also an ebook, and I know they said there's Audible, so yeah, just the various sites people can search for the book.
Yes. So it's Amazon's probably the easiest place to get it. It's Barnes and Noble as well, but depending on where you are on the globe, Amazon. So just go to Heaven's Bell at Amazon, or you can read a little bit more about me and the journal and some other reviews at www.heavensbell.com, and just learn more there as well.
Nice. Yes, I said it before, but I'll definitely be getting my copy, because again, I thought this is something that we've experienced, and and it just feels like it's good to have something that it's good to have a resource, pretty much. So if there's anyone listening, I hope you've found some great gems from this episode today, that will also help you in your grief journey if you are grieving, or if you know someone who's grieving, in turn it can help them. And like I said, Sherrie, thank you for coming on. And
Thank you so much. I'm
yeah,
grateful for your work, and I wish you continued success.
thank you. That means a lot. for those listening, thank you guys for listening. It's much appreciated. I'm sure she will appreciate it as well. So don't forget to find us on Thinking Out Loud Podcast on Instagram. Also on TikTok as well. I'll put a link to our TikTok. You know, I'm trying to keep up with the times. You know, TikTok is a big thing now, so I don't want to get I don't want to get left behind. So follow us on TikTok, but all the social media links I'll put in this episode. But yeah, thank you, and that's another episode.